All right, here we go. Betsi Flint, great to have you on. I've known you for a long time, since one of my first higher level college coaching experiences, my first job at a college coach. Back then, she was Betsi Meter, and she was a libero on the indoor side at LMU. I got the great privilege to coach Betsi, and just kind of had the joy of seeing Betsi turn into not only one of the best beach volleyball players in the world, but also a great coach, and now, as a mentor to the next generation of young female players. So, Betsi, just let's kind of get this started. For you as a player, maybe what parts of the game came more naturally to you, and what parts of the game do you feel like you've had to work more at?
I'd say serving and passing has always been more of a strength of mine, specifically passing. I had a high school coach. We did a ton of ball control stuff. And I was an outside hitter. I played all around throughout my life until I got to college. I was a libero. So that's always been a little easier, but something I've always worked on throughout the years. And then attacking and offense has been something I'm still working on. And especially in the beach game, it's different than indoor, and I'm more of a shooter, but finding ways to terminate by attacking harder and just varying my offense. So definitely working on that a ton.
Something that I always like to I'm curious about, always picking the brain of players that become elite athletes. What was your athletic development like? For example, did you start playing volleyball at a really early age? Did you pick it up later? Did you play multiple sports? When did you start specializing in beach ball? All that kind of stuff.
I was a tomboy growing up, so I did everything. I wanted to do what my brother did. So I played a bunch of different sports: basketball, softball. I started YMCA volleyball in 6th grade, and then I actually did club basketball through my freshman year, and then decided just to go volleyball my sophomore year. I grew up in Arizona. I moved there in 6th grade. So that's when I kind of started beach volleyball. I had friends who did it, and we'd play the weekend leagues. I was really, really bad to start, and it took time, but we just had fun doing it. And eventually got better. And I think it helped my indoor game for sure, just being able to have all those reps and touch the ball more than you do indoor.
So you started beach and indoor about the same time, or did you start beach earlier?
Beach was maybe 7th or 8th grade, a little later.
Pretty similar.
Yeah.
And you kind of came into, when you were getting recruited, at least certainly when you were getting recruited to play college volleyball, college beach volleyball wasn't on the radar. It's still in my mind whether 2011 or 12 or
it was
13. When was
2011? I knew there was talk about it when I was going to college that they might add it, but there was no guarantee. And I wanted to play beach volleyball more than anything, so I wanted to be in California. And I actually committed really late, my senior year. And I got really lucky that a spot opened up at LMU, and I felt like it was my dream to be in California. And then when Tom Black was my coach who recruited me, when he added beach volleyball as a sport my sophomore year, it really felt like a dream come true, because that's really what I loved.
That's awesome. So even when you were playing indoors, were you playing beach during the summer?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember my freshman year, I couch surfed on teammates' couches in the summer, and I just played tournaments with anyone who would play with me. I had a teammate in Santa Barbara. We went up and played. It didn't matter how good we were. We just went out and played, and it was a ton of fun and learned a lot. And yeah, I think there's definitely some value in just playing with different people and not practicing much and just adapting.
Yeah, obviously, the focus of this is on beach volleyball, but I find it just kind of interesting. I'll reference on the indoor side of the game. One of the best players at LMU history. I don't know if you still hold the WCC dig record, but I think when you graduated, you held the conference record as libero on the indoor side. And I think you could probably say about your development that you are not a specialist libero. I think that's probably pretty clear. Like you were on the indoor side, you were an outside hitter, so you obviously played all the way around. But you did that, and you played a lot of beach. And that's probably like a leading question. I kind of know what the answer is going to be in terms of yes or no. But maybe just expanding upon like, do you feel like that all around development helped you as a libero versus specializing like some kids do 8th or 9th grade? Oh, I'm a libero and only a libero.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I always wanted to be an outside. I was recruited as an outside, but I wanted to play more, and I knew I wouldn't play if I was an outside at the level I wanted to. I think it definitely helps. Just you have that, IQ, and that you can think like a hitter when you're setting them, or you're passing. I'm stealing balls from my hitters so they can go hit and they don't have to pass. I think it is challenging with some who are maybe super super short and have a hard time attacking, and they have better hitters on their team to not specialize early. But the more that they can get those reps, even in practice in high school, our coach had the middles like passing and doing the ball control drills that everyone was doing, and it definitely helped.
Then just what are the pros and cons of being a dual sport athlete when you get to college? Because you were, and kind of in the early days of NCAA beach volleyball, almost everybody was a dual sport athlete. Um, but then at some point now there's more surface
Yeah.
specialization, and then certainly you've been involved in the recruiting side of the college. I don't know, what are some of the pros and cons? If you're a youth coach, steering players towards focusing on a surface, or you like playing both as long as you can? Like, what are the pros and cons there?
Yeah. I think it could depend individually. You definitely see more specialized now. For LMU, we only share one or two athletes with indoor now, and it used to be, the full roster. There's definitely advantages. I feel like you can get better at your sport faster if you're just, specializing. Um, and for us, we see, some of the girls who come from indoor, it takes them a little bit to get in a rhythm, and we wish we had them out there all fall. But I think it's nice to not burn out as well. Like some athletes really struggle with one thing over and over and over again. So it helps with, just seeing different surface and different warm-ups with different coaches. So you're learning different things from each person that you can take, to indoor or to the beach. So I don't know if there's a right answer or what I'd prefer, because it's nice that some athletes really thrive doing both, and you can learn a lot in both situations. But I wouldn't want them specialize like super super early if they were to do that. If I'm talking about my daughter anyway, I hope she
Yeah,
does, everything as long as she can, until she really finds like what she loves.
makes sense.
I do think, sorry, the challenge with beach volleyball that we've seen is that there's not a ton of scholarships. You get 6 per school if you're fully funded. And I think that's where it's tricky with some athletes who want to get scholarships to play. Maybe indoor is the route to go. And then if they have a beach team, you can play in the spring as long as the coaches agree to that.
Have you seen, and I don't even know if this is true one way or the other, are the schools that are kind of near the tops of the rankings, which now includes LMU after a great season last year, are they targeting more indoor only players and are more the dual surface players at schools that are lower, or is it just kind of all over the place?
I'd say more just beach only. A lot of the top schools, you don't see a lot of sharing, which is it's kind of fun. We're one of the few schools to do it, because there's these hidden players that no one sees all fall, and then they come in the spring and they make our team better too, and our team switch and the pairing switch, and yeah, secret weapon.
One of the things talking about at Gulf Shores that I was talking about with John Mayer, the head coach at LMU, was the success of the LMU threes pair. Shanna Sotterly and Jesse Pritchard, who were also, I coached them when they were just freshmen at LMU in 2016, indoor only players. And he so kind of the long story short is by the end of their spring of 21 season, they're one of the top three pairs in the country, and for whatever they're worth, college, the beachvolleyball.com, whatever Pablo rankings has them as one of the top overall pairs in the country, top 20 certainly. And he said, hey, if they where they were at as indoor players or as beach players their freshman year, they would have never made the team. Like essentially, hey, we would have never ended up recruiting them now, but they ended up being really good. I don't know, just what did you see in the evolution of players like that were not as advanced beach players, and not somebody like, for example, Taryn Cloth, was like, okay, yeah, somebody that physical,
Yeah.
okay, there's an obvious reason you're going to recruit somebody like that to come over full time on the beach.
Yeah.
But what about some of these players that they weren't as physical, but somehow they end up becoming really good beach players? Like, what's the evolution like that?
Yeah, I think that experience really helps, and they developed their volleyball IQ their freshman year. Not sure they had a choice. They kind of just were thrown out on the sand, and they weren't as probably bought in or cared as much, especially when you have indoor players who go to the beach. They can be a little goofy right away because they're not as good, that their mentality is not like, okay, I'm going to come out here and crush it. Not everyone. Some may be like that. So for them, they just got older and they really enjoyed it, and they learned a lot like through experience and playing, and just their volleyball IQ grew, and they were just the steadiest pair. They're fun to be around, and you kind of knew that they would get us a win, which was nice. You didn't have to focus all your attention as a coach on that team, because sometimes we play all five at once, not always, and you have to put your attention somewhere.
This is a question that is almost asking like for a silver bullet. So these questions you don't have a clean answer, but maybe there's any stories that come to mind or just kind of any anecdotes. But just what you said there is, okay, they're primarily indoor players, and then they're getting out there on the beach, and they're a little silly with it or not taking it seriously. And I've seen that a ton, especially with youth players, 15, 16, 17 year olds who kind of feel like they're pretty good indoor. They're pretty good. They're some of the better players in the area. And sometimes they get out on the sand and they feel like they're not doing very well, obviously because of the natural challenges there. And sometimes they get into a little bit of that, or they're just going to be a little goofy rather than really kind of take it seriously. And I don't know if you have just any thoughts about that. Like, I think a lot of players intellectually understand that playing in the sand might help them, but then they have just a little trouble with that initial discomfort.
Yeah, I think it's hard. It's definitely a defense mechanism. I mean, even when I take time off, when I get back on the sand, I can like act a little goofy, and then I have to like catch myself, like, no, like just pretend like I've, been playing for a long time, which I have, but just taking time off in the sand can make you feel that way. I think just having a conversation with them and, letting them know that's going to be challenging and probably not pretty, and everyone who's around you knows that, like, it's not a big deal. But I think the more their teammates and their peers kind of feed into that goofiness, the more they do it. So if you have the peers and people are super focused and competitive, like, they naturally start getting more competitive and wanting to win.
Like, that's one of the biggest things. It's just maybe even more than the indoor side where the coach has, I don't know, you have a lot of energy around you as a coach. You sometimes almost feels like you can exert your will a little bit more over the training environment on the beach side, especially when you're trying to get kids fired up about it. There's got to be some other teams there that they like playing against, and I don't know. I don't know. That was probably not much of a question there, but just kind of seeing the same dynamic too.
Yeah, I don't have like a here's what to do kind of.
So we're looking for all the answers.
Yeah. Wish I had them all.
Well, we'll transition a little more into some of the kind of the technical aspects of the game, talking maybe a little bit more about serve pass now. So obviously, if anybody has more questions that have to do with that stuff, drop them in the chat. We can always work them in there. But in terms of talking about serving and passing, you are in AVP history, Betsi, the only player to average over 1/8%. Now, when I say AVP history, they've only been recording these statistics for 3 years. But still, for now, we can still say you're the only player in an AVP season to average over 1/8%. And now I can say for the group, back in 2012, playing indoor, you were a high ace server. You always, from the first time I ever saw you play, you were always a high ace, slightly high error server. Was that just a mentality that you always had? Is just that attacking mentality as a server?
Yeah, I definitely developed more as I learned from like your stats and just from stats from coaches. Like in general, I felt like I always had pretty good hand contact on the ball, so the ball would move a lot. But learning more, I remember like Ron Larson in practice, he coached us one year. In practice, I was telling him where I was serving. He goes, why don't you go like a little closer to line, like just really pinpointing where I was serving. And I was like hesitant, like, can I serve that close to line? And just having that mentality of like, okay, I'm gonna go for it. And I did it and it was successful. And I was like, oh, I can like aim a little bit more this way, and just realizing like I can be really specific with where I'm serving to get people in trouble, not just, their general area, but really picking a clear spot and taking risks, like going for sidelines. And I'm not aiming like right on the sideline because I'm going to miss a lot, but airing a little bit more in from the sideline instead of just like right in the middle of the court can be really effective for getting aces. And as I've learned a lot from you, this seems super obvious, I guess, but I guess the serve that they least expect is the one that's going to get aces. And this seems really obvious, but having that mindset, like, okay, how can I change what I did instead of getting caught up in like, okay, do the same serves over and over and over again. Can I do something a little different, like varying my speed, the depth, maybe adding a little spin? I don't do like a full top spin. But I've been trying to add a little bit more of a hybrid, like switching up, my spins where I'm serving from, just doing things with more variability so they don't know exactly what's coming.
When you're and maybe just kind of almost think about like almost like tools in the toolkit, because you're kind of saying, hey, you want to hit the serve that they're expecting least. So it's kind of two elements there. You got to know which serve that they're expecting least, and then you got to be able to hit that serve.
Yeah.
It's kind of like almost all of these things is like, if you got to have the game plan, the right plan, but then also the ability to execute it. What's like the first tool in the toolkit? So say you have a player that's coming to you that you're going to start working with. It's like, what's the first thing that they got to be? Is it serving out of zone 6 straight up the middle, like just that basic pressure serve up the middle, or is there some other serves that you want to work in? Like, where do you start?
Yeah. I mean, middle to middle is a great serve. Like, it comes at them really fast and they have to communicate. I think it is dependent on the person, like what their strength is. Like, we want to sharpen that weapon, and maybe they're a good spin server. Like, we want them to be really good at that and really precise at where they're hitting and being aware of where they're serving. A lot of players just serve to serve, but getting them clear, like, hey, this is our target. We're not serving right at our target. We want to hit some space around there. I definitely start there, and then get them thinking like, we've pulled out the speed gun at LMU, which has been really effective. When we first used it, we didn't even like say anything about it. We're like, okay, we're gonna clock how fast you're serving and kind of write them down and see like what your range is. And they naturally started to like vary their serves, which was interesting. Like, they would hit a serve that's 31, and then after they did it a few times, like they'd hit some that are like 25, and that just got their awareness, how fast I'm serving, and some of them just like drop out, and they can be really effective. And I mean, Joe, you've got us talking more about knockouts, so knocking the other team out of system. And I think that's really effective because ace and error doesn't always tell the story of the game. We want to knock the other team out of system at least 50% of the time. So having that mentality of like, what can I do to, disrupt them and cause them a little trouble so they have a hard time attacking so we can win this point. So having, that mentality, like, can I vary my speed so I can knock them out? Like, where is this player weakest at? There's a lot of things to consider when you're serving.
So adding on to that, just kind of, and I know something that talked to you before about is, you almost have some servers that are going more for kind of consistency, almost be them more as like knockout servers. Okay, you're just gonna hit a lot of consistent good serves, and then it's gonna aces, they happen within that. And then sometimes, you maybe touched on this a little earlier, the times where you're kind of going for an ace, like you feel like you set up a serve, like maybe you're putting middle pressure up, pressure at the middle. You see a server kind of covering, pass kind of covering in there, and then okay, I'm going to try to see if I can pop that sideline for an ace. Is that something that you use? Let's just start with that for you as a player. Is that something that you're looking to do? Sometimes you're trying to serve for an
Yeah.
ace.
Oh, for sure. I think I go for aces maybe more than I should, just why I miss a lot. But it has paid off, but also, I mean, there's matches where serving, like they're in system a lot and it's really tough. Like I'm playing like on the world tour, like some of the best passers, and it's really hard to knock them out. So for me, I'm definitely not scared to serve the person I'm not supposed to be serving, or, you know, maybe the stronger player. And I think that can throw them off a lot. Like you're setting them up for something, you're going to serve their partner a few times, and then you're going to, you know, sneak one down their sideline. But yeah, we have some players like at LMU who are more like strategic servers. So they're really trying to like get them in certain space, a certain spot. Like maybe I'm gonna serve them short, but I'm not necessarily going for an ace just because they're high. They have a lot of errors and maybe not so many aces and not as many knockouts. Like we work on it. But when it comes to game time, like we want them to serve, you know, more strategically and trust our defense rather than like go for the aces. So it's finding that balance. And stats really help. It's easy. I mean, it's easier to actually see versus, you know, just watching.
Yeah, kind of maybe to expand or fill in a little background on that. That's kind of something that we've talked about over the last couple of years, kind of developing and studying some of the statistics on serving. You almost have these two divergent paths where some servers, tend to be able to be pretty high knockout servers, but maybe not super high ace servers. And then those kind of fall into your more strategic, and they need to serve to set up their defense. And then you have some servers that are just the way to say it is capable of serving aces. So you know, for example, you've kind of shown that you are capable of serving aces even against one of the best players in the world. So that becomes a viable strategy for you. And worth noting that you're doing that off a float, not off a spin. I think sometimes we tend to think of the spin servers as the servers that are going to go back there and serve aces, but you're doing it off a float.
I would add to like there's matches where like there's a lot of wind and maybe I'm on like the bad side and I am serving more strategically because I can't knock them out. I can't serve aces. It's a little tougher. So it's nice to have like the tools in practice. Like I'm better with my 4-step jump float, but there was a practice where I told John like, okay, I'm just going to do my 2-step because I rely too much on my 4-step that scores a ton. And there's matches that it's not scoring, or I go to my 2-step, or it's windy. So even though it's tougher for me because I just want to go to my 4-step, it's good to kind of constrain myself in practice to just doing that 2-step so I can find new ways to score and knock them out.
So I think maybe that's worth touching on, just as we're talking about some of those mechanics. So you have maybe a jump float that looks a little bit more like this, kind of a full run up into that serve. You know, an opportunity for a player to be maybe a little bit more dynamic, get a little bit more of a run up into that. And then it's maybe a little bit more dependent on wind conditions, on service conditions. You know, it's going to be a more aggressive serve. And then you want players to also have that 2-step in their toolkit.
Yeah, and we'll have practices where we tell them, all right, you're just going to work on 1 or 2 wind serves. We call them wind serves, just to develop a new part of your game. And it gets them out of their comfort zone. And sometimes they try things that they didn't try before. And it pays off. It works for them. And then they're comfortable like switching up mid game. Like I've trusted this. I can do it in a match. You know, I did in practice. I can trust it in a match.
And is this about what you like for a player kind of on that 2-step or 1-step, however you're going to kind of define it? Something looks more like this?
Yeah. Some will just stand and do it. Some will, I add a little step. It's whatever they're comfortable doing. yeah, and there's a knockout.
So basically, then it's fair to say that you like players to be working on both. You like them to be working on a 4-step and working on that 2-step, or if
Yeah,
somebody just really prefers the 2-step.
yeah. I mean, we want to find their strength, um, and you want them to sharpen that tool. But we also want them to develop a different serve because, I mean, again, for me, like as a player, there's matches where my serve's not going right and I want to switch it up. So going to my 2-step, going to something completely different, just to change something in the game. We even have developed like some more hybrid servers, and that's more recent. And I've been adding it to my game, is just adding a little bit of spin. Just it shows your opponent something different. You can get it to spin towards the sideline and maybe it tails off a little bit. And just giving them a space where they feel comfortable like exploring these things. At LMU, we have these, we call them labs, where we don't score what's going on, and we have them pick 1 or 2 things they're exploring. So as a server, they're picking like an A and a B serve. Sometimes their A is like, hey, this is my strength, and then the B is something I really want to work on, and they're alternating, so they're getting just reps in both. And then that goes with all skills in the game, with passing and attacking. We give them options to explore. Sometimes it's through film that we find these things that they want to try. And yeah, they're able to like try new things and find something to add to their game because they'll probably use it at some point.
So what does that lab look like in practice? Is that just serving, or is it serving playing it out?
Serving and playing it out. So you'll have passers and playing it
Yeah.
live. We want it to look like a game, and we want them to feel, passers over there just serving to open space doesn't always do things. It could work right away. Like, they've never tried a 2-step. They might want to try it with no one over there. Like just, but we don't want to spend like the whole practice doing that. We want to have a real offense over there, real passers.
And then are they always coming on and defending as well, like playing the rally out?
Ideally, yeah.
Yeah.
They
Okay.
come on and defend. That's more realistic.
So, and we just kind of keep diving into that a little bit more, because I think that's just something coaches always try to find the right balance with, and players too. And sometimes, okay, we're trying to work on your serve, okay, and for sure the most relevant is, okay, I'm serving and then there's passers over there and we got to come on defend and all of that. So and sometimes it just seems like players, okay, they're working on the serve, so maybe you give them a little cueing beforehand, and then they serve and come on and play in the rally. But sometimes by the time the rally's over, you ask them something about their serve, they can't even remember it. It's basically just, and of course, a lot of the answers that, hey, just coach better, focus better, cue better, and all that kind of stuff, and just keep working through it. Just kind of have you encountered any of that at LMU with players? It's like, hey, you're trying to talk about the service, they come off and they're thinking about their defensive move, or the ball they just hit out or something.
For sure. We definitely made the mistake of, okay, we have a serving challenge for them and a defensive challenge, and then like that gets lost. So picking one or the other. And then there are times where you'll serve and come on, and then you'll have an off person serve. So you get it into 2 different ways. But yeah, it's just reminding them to pick something beforehand and checking in with them on how it went. It's easy to forget as like, there's a long rally and something happens. So there can be advantages to, having off team serve, especially if you're on a court, like you have 1 court or maybe 2 courts and a lot of players, having like different stations. You could say like a serving group, a defensive group, and an offense. It's kind of what we did when we had COVID and we had 1 court and 6 to 8 players on the court and we're rotating. So the servers can have a challenge or something to explore. Defense can have something, an offense, and they are just really focused on that one thing. And then once you do get to the game situation, like checking in like on those things that they tried and seeing if they can implement them.
Makes sense. And then just kind of hopping back to trying out different serves. So within float serving, Really, you prefer two-hand toss. Seems like most of the players at LMU. Do you ever teach like a one-hand toss on the jump float, or just talk to us about
Yeah,
that? Or is it just preference? Or
it's just their preference. We used to be more like, okay, this is how you serve. Here's the specific, fundamentals. This is how you do it. But we've gone more towards like, all right, this is, the idea we want. Like, let's figure out how you can make it your best serve, kind of in your own way, exploring new things. So we give them the option. Like we show them a two-handed jump float. We show them a one-handed just top spin, and they can kind of choose what's comfortable to them. I mean, you might know more of the stats. I don't know if like a two-handed or one-handed, like one's more effective than the other. I've tried
no,
one-handed and
yeah.
it doesn't work great for me, but I haven't developed it like I have my
The only
two-handed.
thing I'd probably say is the one hand is less common for elite players. But I can't say I have any statistics one way or the other.
Yeah.
Does it? You have a fair amount of international players that have come through the LMU program, and also just so your experience playing international volleyball. I think it naturally exposes you maybe to some different ideas or different things technically. Sometimes I'm always surprised. I do clinics and camps all over, and how you kind of get these mini environments. Like, oh, in this little area, everybody kind of just does this with their serve. Everybody kind of does this, and it's almost like players are kind of surprised to know that there's other styles out there. And I don't know, just how, and it's kind of almost a balancing. Hey, this is kind of how I like to do it. How I think it's sort of my best serve, with also being able to explore something that is not your best serve yet, but could be. And I don't know, maybe that's just expanding on the serving lab or anything like that, but just I don't know, any other ideas about just how you can get players to balance experimenting with refining?
Yeah. I mean, I really like the choosing like an AB. Sometimes we'll do ABC serve. And just, I guess, just finding ways to like, almost like they have to do it. So we'll sometimes do a game where you have to have like on one side of the court, you have to have no spin on it. And if you do, then you can't score if you do, you can score the point. If you don't, like you're not even allowed to score. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
on the other side, you have to have spin on it, some sort of spin, a side spin, a top spin. If you don't, then you can't even win the point. And that pushes them, like, okay, if I really want to win this drill, I've got to problem solve and find a way to get spin and probably get them out of system to knock them out. So doing different drills like that can push them, because it's easy to do it when it's not scoring, but when you get into the scoring part of the drills or the different games, then you might go back to what you're comfortable with. So putting different constraints on the players so they can problem solve and also use those skills to win the game, because ultimately we want to win. As much as we say like winning doesn't matter, like everyone wants to win. And having them develop these problem solving skills can help them win in a game when there's no coach telling them what to do. They're kind of on their own out there.
And do you incorporate like spin in that? Like, for example, that's kind of almost a difference of like almost a totally different thing. Like, for example, like, okay, you're gonna kind of hit your same basic jump float toss, and you'll try to your A serve is deep, but your B serve is short, or put a little spin on it. But hitting like a quote unquote spin serve is pretty different for some players.
Yeah.
So, are you going to have everybody at LMU do some spin serving, or there's some players that never do any spin?
We love having them do it and try it, even
Yeah, okay.
leading into, maybe if 2-3 weeks out, like, I mean, you find out what your best serve is, but
Yeah.
sometimes you don't realize how good that like hybrid serve is or that spin serve is until you do it consistently. And we do a lot of peer feedback where, so after you finish your drill on your court, because we have 3 or 4 courts going at a time, you'll come in with a coach, so it'll be that small group, and I always ask like, hey, like what's one thing that they did really well, like what was tough to play against, and they answer for each other, and it goes a long way. And it's really cool to do in like, that team environment, because I don't get that as professional. I play my opponents in practice and they're not going to tell me, what I'm doing well. So it's kind of a cool little atmosphere that you can have within, your team to make each other better. And they tell each other things that, I didn't think of, or and it means a lot more when it comes from your teammate.
And maybe just something to add to that is I think it's also really valuable for passers. Um, it's sometimes surprising. I don't know anybody who is maybe a coach, and sometimes even when you're facing some high level passers, it's not uncommon. Hey, you're going to have you're playing a game and you have a coach that's going to enter a replacement ball. So if you miss a serve, pop in a replacement ball so you still play the rally. And it's always surprising me sometimes the coach will hit this kind of junky, some spin but not a clean float, and then like a good passer will have like a lot of trouble with that just because it hits the hand a little differently. So I think sometimes even a player who's not much of a great spin server, and if they had to spin like a whole match, they'd get figured out and they probably wouldn't be successful. But sometimes just the passers seeing some of that variance, like the
Yeah.
junky spin server, is pretty good for passers sometimes too.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it helped our team seeing a little bit more spin serves, because sometimes UCLA, they have a team that spins a lot, or, depends on who it is or what team it is, but you don't see it as much in practice. And our passers are good against float servers because we hit really fast, tough floats all the time.
Yeah.
So it's cool to see them like getting better at like those spins and trying to, predict in their head like what they're gonna do. A lot of times the players are like, man, like they serve really easy. But they're used to playing, our own team that's really tough at serving, and we focus on it a lot.
There's a question there that I want to get to that's a little bit like one that's already been asked, but just kind of continuing a little bit of that line in terms of creating some different serves. Do you guys do some stuff with maybe like varying the sort of size of the court or depth of the court that they have to serve from, or the height of the net or anything like that to create different effects for servers and passers?
Yeah, we've done some where we will move the line. So one side is a little shorter, one's much longer. And we tell them they can serve, they don't have to serve right on the line. We actually don't tell them this. We let them decide what they want to do and kind of figure it out. And that, can kind of replicate wind in a way where sometimes the court feels a little bigger on one side, a little smaller on the other. We'll raise the net and lower it mainly for passing, less for serving. Just, I'd say we lower it more often. Just, the ball comes a little faster.
Yep.
And it's a different game. You hit a little bit harder. It could replicate playing on, a shallow surface. So sometimes we play on that than at people's facilities. What else? And we'll put a rope, around maybe like the second red on the antenna, and like serving under there. If you could do like, you get a bonus for serving under and winning the point, or a game where if you don't serve under, you can't win the point. So they're exploring like serving a little flatter, and then we'll switch it like in the middle of the game, like you got to serve above, above the rope, because sometimes you do it and it's strategy and you got to figure out how to win the point when they're in system.
Yeah, that's something that I've actually been talking to some people about in terms of juniors volleyball. The hard part about like younger players, and I think in beach volleyball, younger is not always as young as in indoor. Like sometimes a 14, 15-year-old player on the beach, because of just the difficulty of the beach game, I think they can be a real beginner out there. And almost in games where the serve, you put that elastic up and the serve has to go over the elastic, and then you can hit under the elastic, just because it actually makes the passing a little easier. And you're at a higher level, you want to make the passing harder. But sometimes with more beginning players, you need to make the passing easy enough, or at least manageable enough that they can play volleyball. So I don't know, it's just like a little bit of a side note there, but
yeah. And I've been doing it a little bit when I want to work on my defense, because like as a professional, like that's something I'm really working on. Defense is way different indoor to beach, and I serve so tough that I don't have to play defense a lot, or it's fairly easy, not easy, but things are a little simpler. So I'll challenge myself, and I don't always tell my opponent, or I don't even tell my partner sometimes, but I'll like throw like some lollipops in, and it challenges myself to work on defensive things to dig the ball more.
Something, this is like a little bit of a side tangent, but we're kind of getting to the 10-15 minutes left. So this is the time to go rapid fire or side tangent questions. So drop them, anybody who wants to ask some questions, you've already been dropping some in there, but please drop some into the chat, or else just let me know you have a question and you can verbalize it. But do you think that players should change their serving strategy at all based on their partner? For example, if you're really going for it on your serve and you're maybe serving some aces, but you're also going to maybe miss some serves and all that, do you feel like your partner needs to be more conservative to pair with that, or like, you know what I'm kind of getting there?
Yeah, I don't think necessarily like so Emily Day is my partner professionally, and she originally was like pretty conservative, but she's bought into the like, I'm gonna serve tough, I'm gonna knock them out, get aces, and she's serving really well. And there's some games where like she's serving really tough and my serve's not feeling as good, and like I want her to keep going for that. And then I'm realizing like, okay, I've got to change a little bit to be more strategic, but if I'm getting the aces and knocking them out, then I don't want to change that. And same for her. We're scoring a ton, defensively, we're point scoring. When we're both doing that, that's great. But there's also those matches where we aren't, and we got to kind of balance like, all right, I'm going to switch to my two step and, just try to knock them out versus just going for aces. So it's being aware. I think it's hard to be aware at the juniors level, and especially when they're switching partners. But being able to train that in the off season and when they're not, going tournaments every week, just exploring those new things. And then once it comes down to it, you can fine tune and talk to them about like whether they're going for aces or if you want them to serve a little bit more strategic.
So, well, that last point, I think it's worth just maybe kind of fleshing out, because this is a couple of people asked questions about this sort of leading into it. Like, basically, how do you get? I think a lot of coaches feel like, okay, at LMU or for you as a professional, you have a lot of time to think about what you want to do, and I don't know, use these more exploratory coaching methods. Okay, hey, let's explore the server, let's explore the server. And that feels just, I think, hard for a lot of coaches to make that connection with their players. I think a lot of coaches feel a lot of pressure, like, the practice is starting here, we only have a couple of hours to practice, we really got to get right into it, and I just got to kind of tell them what to do. Come on, because we got a lot of kids and only one coach. Basically, just, do you have any kind of hacks or best practices, and maybe even keep it to just serving, like, because your A serve and B serve might be different than my A serve and B serve. Like, how do you sort out what you're actually going to do with all of these players?
I mean, it is a little different for us because we do have like, we film sessions with them and we can talk like specifically to each player, and that is really helpful. But maybe having like some examples, maybe it's film, like showing 5 different types of serves. Like maybe you have it on YouTube, like you have it ready to go. Like, here's an example, 5 different serves, like try one to explore today, like find something new and hit it like half the time. Or maybe you're, on that side of the court, you have to hit it. On this side, you can hit your normal serve. Giving them some options, because sometimes it can feel overwhelming when you're like, all right, just try something new. And they're like, well, what do I try? And that's happened with our players when we do different things. So giving them more options, and it can be 3, 4, 5 different things, so they're not all doing the same thing. That could be really helpful.
So more of like, okay, here's 4 or 5 types of serves.
Yeah.
Get familiar, like kind of put a name on it, and then you can start going from there once they have some of that. The question maybe related to that is, do you guys do any kind of hand contact, or just for the developing the contact to spin and develop the contact to float? Like, a lot of players, while you're warming up, you might just go back and forth with your partner, standing on the ground, doing a little hand contact. Do you do it? I mean, is that just kind of some of that stuff that you do on warm up, or do you do anything else to help you develop that feel?
Yeah, I think having them be aware of like we kind of use the ball as a clock, like, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock. And sometimes for warm up, we'll even just toss balls for them to warm up, and, they're attacking or they can serve too. Hit the ball at 3 o'clock. Like, you find a way to score hitting the ball at 3 o'clock. And then after a certain amount of time, or maybe certain reps, like you're going to hit at even 6 o'clock, which is tough, but find a way to score at 6 o'clock, 12 o'clock. And that's kind of effective, rather than like, all right, hit the side of the ball, do this. Like, they're kind of thinking in terms of a clock, and obviously like they're hitting the side of the ball, but you can give them feedback like, yeah, like you really hit that 3 o'clock, or oh, maybe that was more 6 o'clock. So giving them, a chance to explore those different things. A lot of people hit 3 o'clock, like it's a little easier cross body. So, exploring that 6 o'clock serve too. Like, that's where the natural like hybrid kind of comes in. Like, you're doing your float serve and you're hitting 6 o'clock, and it just throws some variance at the passer.
Like something that might be kind of similar to that is, and that is, this is a question that you had, so if I don't ask it right, add to it. But it sounds like, Maddie, you're asking about during a match. So say you have a particular player that you're wanting to target more, but maybe that's not as much your strength. So maybe I'm thinking like a lot of right-handed players, if they're serving out of the middle, it's easier for them to hit that serve to the opponent's left side partner, so to their right sideline, than it is to come across the body to hit to the left sideline. I feel like a lot of players lose their spin or lose their contact, but it could be the other way around. So basically I'm saying, see, the gist of the question is it better to hit your best serve, even if it means going to the wrong partner, to the wrong player, or to hit that easier serve, but to the right partner? And of course, maybe it's dependent, but maybe talk us through that.
Yeah. You definitely want to use your best serve when you can, but if you're always hitting that same serve, then it's going to become not as good, not as effective, because they're expecting it. So, I mean, you want to keep exploring, like, finding another, like maybe that B serve is like, hey, this is your backup, like best serve. But you want them to not know what's coming. And also, I mean, Joe, you found that serving not the target, sometimes they have the lower side out percentage, just because over time, they only get a handful of balls. But I think being okay with serving not the target is totally fine. If they're not in a rhythm, it throws them off. They're totally not expecting the ball. It's not, I think you found it's common, right? That's that stat.
In the majority of NCAA volleyball matches, the player who gets served less has a lower side out percentage, meaning the player that's being targeted more actually sides out better. Now, that doesn't mean that if you started serving the quote unquote better player more, they wouldn't side out better. But basically, I think the takeaway from that is players probably target too much. Players probably target too much with their serve, and the other team starts to get in a rhythm. So there's probably, I know something with LMU leading up to the playoffs last year. There was maybe more of a focus on, hey, when can you break the rhythm and know when to set up to go after that other player? Maybe it's because they're pitching over to the middle too often, or even sometimes in situations, and I think all of this is a balancing act, right? Because you don't want to just be completely random. But I'm thinking just the classic case where there's a crosswind, maybe the wind's coming off the ocean, so you're going to serve towards the ocean side, and so you set up serving cross court, and the other team kind of knows what's going. And of course, like, you got to be able to hit that serve. Like, if you can't hit that serve, you can't set anything up. If you can't throw a fastball, your changeup's not going to work. But I think players, okay, say they're working cross court, they're serving towards the ocean side. They don't even think about, well, let me just sneak one down the line on the strand side, because they don't even think about it. When it turns out statistically, that serve actually works pretty well when you set it up right. So
yeah, and we used to be big on like, all right, face where you're serving, because it comes, a little bit more accurate, comes harder, but being okay with being a little deceptive and setting up like, I'm going to face that way for one serve or two serves, and the next one I'm facing that way, and I'm going to go away from my body. yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, just making it tough and setting them up as a server. And the more you score, the more you can do that, right? Like when you go back to hitting your second or third serve, if you're just throwing in lollipops, you don't get a chance to do that
I
typically.
think, something that you're touching there is something, there's kind of general principle that I see a lot with coaching. And I kind of feel like everything is U-shaped, meaning like when you coach like total beginners, they do way too much. Like they have like so much extra movement and they're like doing all this crazy stuff. And a lot of coaching beginners is like, stop doing this, stop doing this, stop doing this. Maybe you don't say it quite that way, but it's like trying to get them to like not do all this stuff. And then so it's almost like they're like way up here, and then they kind of get settled down as they get more kind of into like solid intermediate level players. But then as they get more advanced, sometimes they start loosening up a little bit more, and they almost start adding a few things back in. So to kind of the takeaway from serving is like, yeah, if you just can't hit the ball straight where you're facing, it's hard to do anything else with that. Okay, so I got to be able to hit the ball straight. But then once I can do that, maybe don't do only that. Okay, so I can't hit the ball straight, and maybe 3 out of 4 times I'm going to hit the ball straight, and then 1 out of 4 times I'm going to hit it off my line where I'm not exactly looking, to be a little deceptive. So it's just kind of, I don't know, I see it as like that arc that a lot of skills have. Kind of entering the final phase. So if anybody has any last questions, get them in here. But this is one that kind of goes to college beach volleyball. So if you're coaching a college program, and the question is, maybe what are some lesser known characteristics or unique characteristics that you might look for of a player coming out of the beach game, and maybe even especially a player, maybe they haven't grown up in Southern California and they're playing on that beach circuit, that juniors beach circuit, since they're in 7th or 8th grade. So if you're, I don't know, just maybe when you're recruiting international players or when you're recruiting players that aren't from the typical hotbed near you, I don't know, is there anything that stands out for you besides height and besides kind of some of the obvious stuff?
Yeah, we've been looking more at, do they have problem solving skills? Are they adjusting in the middle of the game? Because that's, I mean, obviously it kind of shows a little bit of their competitiveness. Like if they want to win, they're gonna, find a way to change things up. But I also think coaches can really help develop that skill, like helping them understand when to make adjustments. Like, okay, I'm getting served a ton. I want to show them something different. I'm going to run a back set. I'm going to, run a different set. I'm going to, serve somewhere else. Just seeing them make changes within the match, especially when they're struggling. Obviously, we love talking to coaches to see if they're high character kids. We want people who are good people and fit our culture and are eager to learn, and not just like, okay, I'm the best at this. Like, I don't want to get better. So we want them to be eager to learn. But definitely those like intangible skills that sometimes we can see, but a lot of times it's talking to coaches to see, do they have that skill every day in practice? And then obviously the physical skills are great too. Like sometimes we're looking at players that aren't as developed, they haven't played the game, but like, man, they do jump high, they hit hard but like, can we get them to do it more consistently? But that's, not always the beach game. The beach game is, you got to be creative, and we don't always need or want the people who jump the highest, hit the hardest. We want an all-around good player.
Cool. All right. I think last question here, and just kind of quote it just directly. I think it's a good question. Any specific keys you're teaching when serving right now, like must-haves, or is the philosophy more of an exploratory one where each athlete is trying to discover what's best for her?
At our level, and maybe someone who's developed a float serve, like exploring is really valuable, and I think it is when you're younger too. But I think the younger kids can definitely use a little guidance on like, here's the mechanics, kind of teaching them a little bit how to do it before they're able to explore different things. I think there's value in watching a little film. I don't think it's possible with younger players, but just developing that footwork and like where they're tossing. Sometimes we'll challenge our players like, hey, toss too far left, like, can you still knock them out? Toss too far right. All right, try to toss like, where you normally do, like the little differential learning. Can help them kind of understand, where they are tossing for one, and maybe help them develop something like the wind takes your toss, or you do, toss way over here. How can I like manage the serve?
Can you think of when you were developing your serve, so whether this was high school or college or whatever, what were the one or two most important keys that really resonated with you? Does anything stand out there?
Yeah, I think the load. So for me, like getting my load back fast, sometimes I'd kind of do two movements and like go up and down and back, and just like as soon as I toss, getting my, arm really far back. And it really helped to have like an iPad watching the replay to see what it looks like, or even like your phone, just getting some video out so I can see it. Because sometimes what I feel and what I see are a little different. So it's nice to mesh them together. That's been really helpful too. And I've worked on it even, in the past 3 years, like feeling how fast I can get my load back. So I'm able to hit it a little harder, a little flatter. And that's been a big key. And then I tend to toss like a little bit here, like on my head, which I think a lot of people do. So getting a little bit more like on my shoulder, so I'm, straight line instead of right here. I can hit it, at the peak of my jump, sometimes a little bit more down.
That's great. And we'll close it up there.